Hello, everyone, and welcome to What's Your Mess? Mental, emotional, social status of life. I am your guest. I am not your guest. I am your host, Tracey D. Armstrong, and I have another amazing guest that will be joining us on today. And as I get ready to start this episode today, I just want to remind everyone that this podcast is not just about my guests telling their story, but it's about the strength and the resilience that this guest has overcome the mess that has happened in her life. And I'm going to be quiet and get out of the way and let her introduce herself. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Tracy. I really appreciate this opportunity to be a guest on your podcast. And I love the name, What's Your Mess? Because everybody has some type of mess, right? In some shape, form, or fashion. So, hello, everyone. I am Dr. Janet Lockhart Jones. I am a native San Franciscan, born and raised. Don't live there now, but native San Franciscan, born and raised. I am the president and founder of a company I started back in 2004, Project Partners Consulting Incorporated. It started as a leadership and management development consultancy. So basically, I do leadership training, strategic planning, training, workshops, etc. I've done that all over the world. I'm also a strong mental health advocate, and you're going to hear some of that when I share my messy story. I'm also a DEI advocate as well, and I'm a public and motivational speaker, and I'll share more about that toward the end of the podcast. So that's me, Tracy.
Well, thank you, and welcome, doctor. Okay.
Thank you.
And I'm so excited to have you on because all of the accolades and all of the things that you do right now, and with the mental health aspect and the speaking and just everything, I know that that hasn't always been your level of life and that hasn't always been your story. So, can you share with the audience what's one of the messes or situations in life that you've had to go through and overcome?
Thank you, Tracy. I've gone through several, but of course, I know we don't have time for several. So I thought about talking about the time when I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a blood cancer, back in 2004, 2005. I also thought about the time where well, my mom lived with me for the last 18 years of her life, and she had a couple of bouts with cancer. And because we lived together, I was her caretaker, myself and one of my older sisters. Thought about talking about that one too. But because I am so very serious about the mental health aspect of society, that's what I want to talk about. So let's go back a little bit to I'm going to say 1997. I was a middle manager working for a government agency. I had my stuff together. I was finishing my doctoral degree program. I was traveling all over the country, and I was a single mom, but I had it together, owned my own home, just living life, right? And so I went to work one day and I had this tickle in my throat. And I was like, okay, sore throat. Let me go to the doctor and get some antibiotics, right? So I called, made me an urgent care appointment, sashay Shantae over to the doctor in my suit and my heels. Because back in the late 90s, we dressed for work. We had the suit, even had the pantyhose, girl. And so I was like, let me go run in here. I don't have to miss any days off. I can see a doctor, get some antibiotics, and I'm good. So I went into the doctor's office. This is a physician I'd never seen before. And he said, why are you here? And I said, well, I've been having a sore throat for a couple of days now, and it's difficult for me to swallow. And so I just want you to take a look, see if I got tonsillitis, see if I got, whatever, and give me some antibiotics. So he went on to examine, my lymph nodes and my throat and all that, which is, right. And then he stepped back, Tracy, and he said, you have HIV. I was like, what? You have HIV, the what causes AIDS? I said, what are you talking about? So he proceeds to say, I've seen this before in people who look like you. What? See, we got to remember that in the 80s and the 90s, HIV and AIDS was the world health epidemic, right? And because I worked in this population of the Bay Area, um, where there's a lot of people of color who maybe he has presented, maybe he had seen people who presented with HIV and AIDS who look like me, but he assumed without any medical test, without anything, that I was one of them because I was Black, because I was female, and because I was showing up in the city of Oakland. Now, Oakland's not where I lived. Oakland was where I worked,
Mhm.
right? So now, I will say I should have known better because, first of all, you don't diagnose HIV just by touching people.
Right, right.
But, sometimes we put our trust in physicians, right? That they would
Mhm.
do the right thing. And it didn't dawn on me that I was being stereotyped
Mm.
because of my race and because of my sex. And I was also being stereotyped because of the community within which I worked. But see, none of this ran through my mind at the time because we hadn't really talked about bias and healthcare inequities back in the 80s and 90s,
That's right.
right? So
Mhm.
here I was in this office being told that I have HIV. Now, he didn't say it's a possibility. He said you have with 100% certainty. So this is what happened. And your listeners, and even you, I'm sure, if you put yourself in my place, you would be stunned.
Mhm. Mhm.
And because I'd never had a major illness in my life, right? So, and besides that, in terms of my intimate partners, at that time, I could count them, less than the number of fingers I had on one hand. And so a lot of these things was running through my mind. And so he says, well, I'm going to order some blood work. So Tracy, when I went down to the lab to get blood work done, and the lady started pulling the vials and all the labels, and it just seemed like 10, 15, 20. It's like, oh my God. So then, of course, I did all this, all the blood work and blah, 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 blah. So I went back to work with this on my mind,
Mhm.
which means I couldn't focus. Um, am I going to die? Let's see what this blood work says. So the blood work came back in like a day or two. And so he calls me up and says, well, the blood work all came back, it's negative, but I don't believe it. Now, when he called me, Tracy, I'm in my office and I can remember it as if it was yesterday. I had a big office, and I had a big conference table. So people would always come, we would always meet in my office. And that's when I got this call. I don't believe it. He wanted more tests. Went in, more blood work, all negative. Can't be true. So this physician who diagnosed me as having HIV or being HIV positive with not one iota of proof, but because I was Black, because I was a female, because there was an HIV and AIDS epidemic in the city of Oakland, which is a city not where I live, but where I work, I had to be part of that community. That's where my entry into mental unwellness started.
Mhm.
I had had no problem since then. Like I said, I was traveling all over the country. I was a single mom, going on vacations. So I went through, I'll fast forward, I went through about 18 months of agony, of panic attacks, of panic disorder, to the point where I could not drive to work. I had to start carpooling with people. I couldn't cross a bridge. I couldn't go to a movie theater by myself. And at the time, my daughter was like 7, because she was born in 1990. And we had a house, and it was just she and I, because her father and I were getting a divorce. No, we were already divorced by then, but we were still good friends. And so I would wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes with these heart palpitations, blah, 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 where I thought I was having a heart attack or a stroke. Because at the time, I didn't really know what panic disorder was. I just knew something was crazy wrong with me. And so I would call my mom. This is before, because at that time, she had her own house and I had my own house. I would call my mom, and she would get up at 11, 12 midnight to come over just to hold my hand so I could calm down. Then she would go back home. And then when the morning came, because I couldn't sleep then, I got insomnia,
Mm.
which was the absolute worst. I didn't get, when I got cancer, that was 2005. The insomnia that I experienced in the late 90s was worse than anything I dealt with when I was going through cancer and
Mm.
chemotherapy. Laying down and falling into a deep sleep, and at 11 p.m. and feeling like, hoping like, praying that when you woke up, it's like 4 a.m. for it to only be 11:15.
Wow.
Falling back to sleep about 1. Deep sleep, waking up, it's 1:30. That went on for months, months and months. So then I went to my primary care physician and told her what was happening. And he was the one that suggested that I probably suffered from some panic attacks and panic disorder. So they sent me to, or recommended me to go to this group that was a group support system to help people who suffer from panic attacks. Well, I would go, and while I'm in that group, I would have a panic attack in my panic attack group therapy.
Mm.
It was a troubling time until I finally, it's like, Janet, okay, you need to let this crazy doctor go and go see a specialist. So I went to see an infectious disease. I started seeing an infectious disease specialist. I got a referral from my primary care. She looked at all of my history. She looked at all of the tests. She ran her own test and called me back into her office and she said, and by the way, my whole throat problem was gone now by then, right? The original problem.
Mm-hmm.
So she says, Ms. Lockhart, because at that time I hadn't finished my doctorate degree, she said, you may have something, but it's definitely not HIV.
Mm-hmm.
So almost 2 years of my life was spent suffering. Friends didn't know because I didn't tell anybody. My mom knew because there was a point, Tracey, when I couldn't go to work. I would get up, I would take my daughter to school, then I would go to my mom's and I would just climb in her bed. My father had long been passed, climb in her bed in like a fetal position. And I would just stay there until it was time for me to go get my daughter. And finally, once we got that HIV mess over, I started taking medication. And this is one thing that a lot of folks, especially people in the Black community, because there's a stigma in the Black community to talk about mental unwellness, because they're afraid of what people may think. Would I agree with that? Did I go through some of that? Yeah, because I didn't tell my friends. My mom knew, one of my sisters knew, but I didn't really share it with, well, one other person, and that was a consultant who was assigned to work with me because on the days I didn't go to work, she carried on for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I did go to work, because even at that time I was a trainer, I was a consultant and trainer, and I used to teach a lot of classes on process improvement and statistical process control at that time. And the courses were like 3 and 4 days each. So at this point, I'm still not on any medication, still having panic attacks, but I had to show up on certain days when I had to teach. So I would be in front of my class. Usually I had anywhere from 20 to 30 participants. And I would be up there doing my thing. Because when I'm in front of an audience, I give every bit of myself. And I did so, even as I was going through full-blown panic attacks. My head felt like there were just needles sticking in my head. My heart, boom, 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 my stomach turning all in knots. But to the people looking at me, they just see Janet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing about mental unwellness. It's not observable to the average person. I mean, I can be going through a panic attack right now, but you wouldn't know it. And I'm glad to say I'm not. I don't have panic attacks anymore, thank God. And, I'm thankful for the physicians who I met with that got me on, put me on the right path to medication. So how did I get, well, how did that affect me mentally? That bout affected me mentally, emotionally, socially. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to do anything. You know, my status of life, um, I'm not sure my status changed, but because I didn't lose my job, through the grace of God, who was with me every single step of that journey. my mom, my sister, who was with me every single step of that journey. Um, I was, like I said, I was able to get through it through a lot of prayer, a lot of faith in God, the right medication. Um, and this is why I'm so serious about wanting to help in the stigma in our community about seeking, one, acknowledging that you have a mental health unwellness situation, but even more important, doing something about it.
Right.
Because for most mental health diagnoses, there is something that can be done. I would say 90%, there's something that can be done to help alleviate a lot of many of the symptoms. So people are like, I don't want to do drugs. Well, there's different types of treatments where you don't have to take any medication. And there's therapy, and there's CBT, or cognitive-based therapy, which is a particular type of therapy that's focused on helping you to train your mind to think differently about certain things, right? And everybody responds to medication differently. So what somebody may be taking at a high dose, I might be taking at a low dose, right?
Mhm.
But I'm grateful for that experience because now it helps me to open my eyes. Now in 2022, I also had a similar bout with mental unwellness, but that was sort of self-inflicted, Tracey. And I'll say that because there was something going on. I was going to have a medical procedure, and I had these pre-testing stuff, and there was a test that showed something about my heart, and nothing major, but just showed something about my heart. And the anxiety medication I was taking at that time was a contributor to that particular situation. So self-diagnosis. Let me stop. Ooh, let's stop taking my anxiety medication. Well, I was fine for a while. And then because the medication stays in your body, when you stop taking it, you don't just, psh. And so about 6, 7 months, 8 later, I started feeling some kind of way. But I didn't even think it had to do with me stopping the medication cold turkey, right?
Mhm.
So then I was back into that mental unwellness state. But I sought help, and I'm good,
Mm.
good. But I had to recognize that, okay, Janet, you're not at your best right now. Something's happening. You're having these weird thoughts, weird dreams. And, you know, self-diagnosis is evil. When you try to diagnose yourself for a mental situation or even physical,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And now I'm not a medical doctor, um, but sometimes I get into that thing that, okay, let me go Google this, let me go Google that, let me do WebMD
Yes.
this, right? Um, but I cleaned up and came out of the mess because one, I acknowledged I had a problem. I had a problem that was affecting my life, that was affecting who I was, that was affecting how I would present myself to the world. Like I said, when I'm on stage, that's like a drug to me. I just get so energized and so high off the energy from the audience. That's why I'm heavily moving into public and motivational speaking about two topics I really care about. The first one is mental health, specifically mental health in the Black community, erasing the stigma, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I can't be at my best on stage unless I have it together. And so therapy has helped. medication has helped, exercise. And one thing that I did back in September of last year, I was asked to speak uh, in the month of September at two webinars. There was this organization called Urban Strategies. They're based in Oakland, and the chief financial officer or the CFO who goes to my church, she had asked me if I wanted to speak um, because they had two openings in September, and I said sure. And the focus of their webinar is erasing the stigma of mental health in the Black community. That was the first time I had acknowledged publicly that I suffered at one point from mental unwellness. And I told my story similar to what I'm sharing with you and your audience. And the weight it was just like the weight was lifted off of my shoulders. And even more importantly than that, the chat just lit up. And they had people from all over the world attending that webinar. They were relating to my story. And not only did I share this same story, I talked about different medications that, if you that are available, different types of mental unwellness, because there's social anxieties, there's all different types of phobias and all that type of stuff. So I had the opportunity to talk about that. But most importantly, I talked about a story that was relatable to my audience and
Right.
encourage them to seek the help that they need, because for most people, you need not have to suffer from mental unwellness. I would say developing mental unwellness is not a choice. Choosing to suffer and not getting assistance is a choice.
Mhm.
Don't make that choice. That's what I say to your audience.
Right. Wow. I'm just listening and I'm just taking it all in and I'm over here like I can relate and I'm thinking about like you unpacked a lot there and your story. First of all, let me go back. The fact that the doctor said what they said right there, I was still stuck on that. And then I can just imagine the mental and the thoughts that were going through your mind, especially those 1 or 2 days while you're waiting on the test. And then after getting the results, and he's still, and then, and then the emotional roller coaster, I'm sure that you probably were on. And like you said, socially not really wanting to be around anyone when your mind is not in the right headspace, you really don't want to socialize with others. And the fact that your status of life, as far as you were able to keep your job, but still the fact that you were not able to move through life freely, like you really, really, you wasn't living your life like you were.
Right,
And I remember having some diagnoses that really flipped my mental health upside down.
right,
And the fact that, and I'm listening to the timeline because that was late 90s. We're here in 2024, and you've been able to come through that and come out of that. And those ways that you did it, I know that your story is going to encourage someone out there that's listening that may be going through a similar situation. And so I do want to ask you this, like if our audience wants to connect with you, like you say, you do speaking and you do mental health awareness, especially erasing that stigma, like especially in the Black community. And I can only speak for the Black community. It's still a stigma, even from like you said, those that was the 90s, the 80s, the 70s. we've come further, but we still have so much farther to go with changing that mindset about speaking up, about getting the help, about not
Mm.
feeling ashamed or embarrassed to let someone know you're going through. So
Right.
what ways can people connect with you if they, wanted to get more information?
Absolutely, Tracy. I have a website, my speaking website. And if I can just share it. So while I'm pulling this up is www.drjanetspeaks.com, www.drjanetspeaks.com. Let me really quickly. So for your audience, are you able to see this, Tracy?
Yes, most definitely.
Thank you. So you will find this on my speaker page. This is my speaking one page. If you look at some of my signature keynotes here, mental health matters, break the silence and end the stigma. EDI, D&I, a loss without equity. Succeeding while Black in all white spaces, stopping imposter syndrome, because that too contributes to mental unwellness. Then I have a leadership program and keynote called AIM Leadership, which promotes authenticity and confidence, influencing inclusion and equity, and minding your mental health. And then my last one, do you stutter? A lot of people think that stuttering is a mental health condition when it's really not. And by the way, I stutter, but you didn't hear me stutter once when I was
Not
telling
at
my story.
all.
And now, and I've spoken all over the world, Tracy. I've traveled to India and Brazil and Belgium and London and Argentina. I've spoken and did workshops all over the world. And so I want people to know that even if you are a person who stutters, you don't have to let that define you, right? So I have two things. My website, Janet at projectpartnersconsulting.com. That's actually my corporate website, because remember I said in my introduction, I became an entrepreneur and started my own company back in 2004 called Project Partners Consulting Inc. And then my speaker website, www.drjanetspeaks.com. So either one of those opportunities are the ways to speak with me. My corporate email, Janet at projectpartnersconsulting.com, Janet at projectpartnersconsulting.com. There's one other thing that I'm just like super excited about, if I could share. Okay, great. So I am going to be one of 35 or 45 speakers on the Leadership Experience Tour in late October. It's going to be blasted all over the world. There will be 30, 35 speakers who will come together at the University of Michigan. And I will be speaking on mental health. So for those of you that are listening into this podcast, you will hear a slightly longer version of my talk here. So I'm just super, super excited about that.
Yes.
You.
That is so exciting. Congratulations.
Thank
Like,
you. Thank you so much.
for real, and I will have, and stay tuned to the end, everyone, because I will have all of those flyers and that information for you, and her website and everything listed for you so that you can access her more. But that sounds awesome. I've got to look at my calendar and see if I can come out and support you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just super excited about that. I have been in the leadership development space for so long. And I mean, it's been good financially. The companies that I've been able to do work for, a lot of the Fortune 5, Fortune 1000 companies, the opportunity to travel all over the world. But at this stage of my life, I'm going to still do a little of that, but I want to become more focused on helping people to elevate to their next level of mental wellness.
Mhm.
That's my purpose in life for the rest of my days on this earth. So that's and having gone through mental unwellness and being able to talk about it, being able to relate to people who themselves are going through it, or people who are in denial, or people who are going through symptoms but don't want to classify it as mental health. The one other thing, and I'll mention, is I just took last Saturday, I went through a 1 day, I should say the first half of a mental health first aid certification program. I think it's, and I know I'm probably going to mess this up, but it's sponsored by the organization, I want to say for mental health and well-being. But if you Google mental health first aid, that will tell you a lot about what the program is and certification is. So basically, as a mental health first aider, you get trained to recognize signs and symptoms of people who might be going through a mental health challenge. As a mental health first aider, we don't diagnose, we don't treat, but we try to assess, is this person potentially at the possibility of harming him or herself or others? We try to um, uh, ask questions, so we listen. There's this whole little protocol that we go through, and we encourage, because you can't help people unless you know what the signs are,
Right.
what to look for,
Mhm.
right? And then if you see a sign, then what do you say? Because you can say something that is inappropriate and they may put that person over the edge, right? So that's
Mhm.
what the mental health first aid certification program is all about. So I finished the first part, which was 8 hours in person, the first 4 modules. So now I just got to do the online portion and then take the final exam. And then I'll also be a mental health first aider. And it's like people go to CPR first aid. It's similar to that, but for mental health. And the program that I went through was offered by the Western Episcopal District of the AME Zion Church, which is a Black church community. And so, because what the facilitator and her organization wants to do is to bring mental health first aid into the Black church community. Um, the in-person program was so dynamic. It was so enlightening. And people who had suffered from childhood trauma, which led to mental health, shared their stories. So it was really, um, the program really underscored a need to help people become a mental health first aider if you are truly interested in reaching out and helping people navigate their journey back to mental wellness. So I'm just super excited about that. And I should have that final certification within the next 60 days. It's just depending on when I sit down, and focus.
Yes, completely understand. And yes, I went through that because I teach social and emotional learning for the
Oh,
youth,
wonderful.
and I had to go through the
Ah,
mental health first aid
yeah.
certification.
So yeah.
Yes, exactly, and in person and in the book and getting it
Yes,
done. But it is so rewarding and it is so
yeah,
worth it, especially when you can recognize those signs and symptoms, and then you can help
absolutely.
assist in the right way and you can say the
Yes,
right words. Yes, and thank you again. I just want to thank you for your time. I want to
well,
thank you for your story and sharing with the audience. And I just want to ask, before we wrap up, are there any last words of encouragement that you would like to leave with the listeners?
yes, I would. My last words of encouragement is this: if you are a person who is suffering or think you're suffering from a mental health challenge, seek help. You can call NAMI, the National Association of Mental Illness. There's local chapters all over the country. They have an 800 line. You can talk to a NAMI counselor who can recommend additional resources for you. But over and above that, you do not have to suffer from mental unwellness. Whether you're bipolar, whether you're schizophrenic, whether whether you have paranoid thoughts, seek help. Now, some of you might say, well, I don't have health benefits that cover mental unwellness. I don't have health benefits that cover therapy. Reach out to the National Association of Mental Illness. Start there. They will help you find resources. Look up local mental health resources in your community, in your city. It's plausible that you may find something that are offered for free or at very, very, very low cost. The point is, I have been at some of the lowest points in my life. Like I said, the mental unwellness that I experienced through no fault of my own was the lowest part of my life. I will say the 2022 bout, when I stopped taking my medication, yeah, I was a contributor to that. I'll own that. But if you're having mental health issues or you believe you are, and you have a primary care physician, talk to your primary care physician. Just tell them, hey, I don't think I'm mentally well. They have resources for you. You don't have to suffer needlessly. So please don't. And I don't care if you're black, blue, orange, white, or green. I don't want you to suffer needlessly. If you're against medication, there's other options. There's other options. Just take that first step. I've been where you are. I don't want you to have to go there. Get the help you need.
Thank you. And that is so true. And we'll end with that. Get the help that you need. Um, and we're wrapping up another episode of What's Your Mess? Mental, emotional, social status of life. And I just want to leave you with this powerful quote. If you want to be sad, keep thinking about the past. If you want to be anxious or worried, think about the future. But if you want to be happy, focus on the present day and be grateful for what you have. This is Tracey D. Armstrong with What's Your Mess? Have a good one, y'all.